but if you need me to do it, there we go. All right,
All
kick
right,
us
let's
off
get
when
this
you're ready.
going. Hey, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Greetings from the East Coast, where I just ate a bunch of noodles. So bear with me. It was an excellent dinner. I hope you all had excellent dinners as well. And if not, may one be soon in your future. Welcome to our webinar on Walking Together Information. I'm Joel Chapman, the Program Associate for Folk and Traditional Arts. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white male with shoulder length blonde hair, Prince of Darkness lighting. Um, and I'm speaking to you from Baltimore, Maryland, where Mid Atlantic Arts is headquartered, the unceded traditional lands of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples. I'm joined today by some of my excellent colleagues in various RAOs across the country, and you'll get to hear from all of them. But let's just do a quick round robin first and have everyone briefly introduce themselves. I'll start out with Adrienne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Petrillo. I'm the Senior Program Director for Regional Grants at the New England Foundation for the Arts, or NEFA, as we're often known. I am calling in from Massachusetts and Pawtucket land, which is in the Boston area. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman with brown hair wearing a blue dress, and I have a green background. I will pass it over to my colleague, Say Jin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sejin Yu. I'm the program coordinator for regional initiatives at NEFA. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also calling in from Boston, the unceded lands of Massachusetts and Pawtucket peoples. I'm an Asian woman with long black hair, and I'm wearing a beige cardigan today. And I will pass it over to Christine.
Say. Hi, I'm Christine Bile. I'm the Director of Arts and Humanities Grant Programs for Mid-America Arts Alliance. I'm a white, middle-aged woman with shoulder-length hair, wearing a black turtleneck sweater and gray shawl. Mid-America Arts Alliance is located in Kansas City, Missouri, but I'm speaking to you from my home office in Lawrence, Kansas, which is the unceded traditional lands of the Kansa. Christelle?
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here tonight. I'm Cristal Celeste Price, Program Manager at Arts Midwest, and I'm calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah, it's great to see you all. I'll pass it to,
Ashanti, you want to introduce yourself?
yeah.
Hello, my name is Ashanti McGee. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a brown-skinned Black woman with dark hair, braided back. I am uh, I am I am the Student Access Manager for Creative West, formerly West Staff, and I am actually calling in from the Reno airport right now. So yes. So, but Creative West is located in Denver, Colorado.
And I'm Ellie Dassler. Thanks to everyone, all our presenters for being here, especially Ashanti for joining us, even though she had an earlier flight that got canceled and has to join us from the airport. But I'm Ellie Dassler. I'm the program director for Folk and Traditional Arts at Mid-Atlantic Arts. So I work with Joel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with dark hair and bangs. I'm wearing a green blouse. And I am also calling in today from Baltimore, the unceded traditional and contemporary lands of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples. And before we get started, I'd also just like to share that I know many of you may be feeling some uncertainty in response to news coming from the federal government last week and continuing this week. We just want to say that we feel that uncertainty alongside you. We are lucky to have a private funder supporting Walking Together. And at the time of this webinar, we are moving forward with the program as we and our partners have designed it. If you have questions about how potential changes to federal funding could affect the RAO's other programs, I encourage you to reach out to us outside of this webinar. We may not have all the answers as we are learning things at the same time that you are, but we will do our best to share what we know. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and can find some time to rest. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, everyone. Some more housekeeping before we dig in. We'll have a Q&A, question and answer period at the end of today's webinar, so we'll answer all your burning questions then. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the question and answer box, quotations Q&A. Access through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I think it should be on the right side of that bar. And I know that there's a temptation to put your questions right into the chat. I get that, but we might not get to them if you don't put them in the Q&A. So make sure you please do that. We'll work down the list and try to answer all the questions that we have time to answer at the end. Accessibility. Guidelines are available at usregionalarts.org/walkingtogether on PDF format and an accessible Word file. If you need an accommodation at any point during your application process, please contact me, Joel Chapman, at walkingtogether@midatlanticarts.org. That's the email address, and we can put that in the chat. I think it's right there on the screen, though. Please make sure to request accommodations at least 2 weeks or 10 business days before the application agenda or before the application deadline. Up next, the agenda. Getting ahead of myself. What are we getting into today? We're going to go through all the most important parts of the Walking Together application and guidelines and how to get started on a self-nomination for your organization. And then, as promised, question and answers at the end. But first, let's talk about the RAOs. Who are we? Who are the regional arts organizations?
Thanks, Joel. So yes, we have all introduced ourselves. We have all said we work at a different regional arts organization, or RAO, as we are known, because we love some abbreviations. The RAOs represent 6 different organizations. You can see it on the map, the parts of the US that each of us serve. You can see that we have very different regions. Some are very large and include large states. Some are much smaller regions with smaller states. Each organization serves artists and arts organizations through their own set of programs and services. And we are all independent organizations. So while we do work very closely with the National Endowment for the Arts and our partners at each of the state arts agencies, such as in Massachusetts, we have the Mass Cultural Council. We are not actually government agencies. None of us are government employees, which I think we are all sort of happy about perhaps in this moment. And we are funders. We give out grants. We're going to talk about some grants tonight. But we are doing this as 501c3 organizations. So we are all nonprofit organizations. So we know what it's like to also be on the grant writing side of things. We raise funds that we then put out into the field. So in addition to each RAO having their own set of programs that serves their own region, we also work together collaboratively, and that's why we're here tonight. Walking Together is a collaboration of all 6 RAOs. It is led by our wonderful colleagues, Ellie and Joel at Mid-Atlantic Arts. I will note that Walking Together is just one of the many opportunities that are offered through the RAOs, both collectively and individually. I would recommend looking into your own RAO to see what else might be offered that would be appropriate for your work. You can find out about all of us and find our contact info at usregionalarts.org.
All right, so this program is called Walking Together, Investing in Folk Life in Communities of Color. But what do we mean when we say folk life? This is often also called the art of everyday life. Folk life is a broad term that includes art forms and other creative expressions that reflect the aesthetics, practices, values, and beliefs of community groups, including families, geographic communities, heritage groups, and more. You'll also hear us call these traditional arts. These traditional arts are often passed down from generation to generation, learned in context-dependent ways rather than in institutional or academic settings. All of these traditions are connected to the history of the communities that practice them. but they're not just art forms of the past. Instead, they're living traditions that adapt to remain relevant in a changing world, including new and emerging traditions. Individuals and communities use traditional arts to build collective power, engage in healing, and strengthen their identity. Traditional arts for the purposes of this program include visual arts, such as crafts, performing arts like traditional dance, music, and storytelling, food and medicine traditions like traditional agriculture, recipes, hunting and foraging, also community history or oral history, and much, much more. And folklife or traditional arts goes by many names, so you might use a different word to describe your traditions in your community, and that's just fine. These are just the words that we're using for this program. So let's look at some examples. When you look at these pictures, you can see lots of examples of folklife or traditional art. That includes specific objects and activities like pottery or gospel music or breakdancing, food preparation, traditional agriculture like the woman harvesting with a machete, and traditional clothing. But we can also think deeper and think about the cultural context of these things. We can learn about what the pottery is made from, how it's decorated, who is dancing, how they learn to dance, when certain foods are prepared, what songs the drummers are playing, when they would play them, who they would play them for. We can think about the role all of these traditional arts might play in someone's identity. And these are all dimensions of what we call folk life. Those of us who practice, study, and support folk life have been wrestling over how to define that word for more than 100 years, but I think that's actually a strength of the term. Like the concept itself, the word folklife remains a flexible lens to look at these homegrown art forms that we all use for expression, communication, and so much more. So that's why we're using the word folklife. But like I said, you might use a different word for this, and that's okay. We really welcome that, actually. If you have any questions about whether something counts as folklife, I'll tell you now that it probably does, but feel free to reach out to us to talk about how you think about these concepts, how they apply to you and your community, and how we are applying them to walking together in more depth. So walking together, what is walking together? Walking Together, Investing in Folklife in Communities of Color is a national funding program supporting folklife, so all those traditions and creative practices that we just talked about, rooted in communities of color in the United States. Walking Together will provide $15,000 awards for 6 traditional artists and practitioners in each RAO region for a total of 36 artists nationwide. We'll also give $50,000 awards to 1 organization or collective in each state or jurisdiction, so 56 total. These grants are unrestricted for artist grantees. There's no match requirement, so you do not have to find other funding from another source in order to receive it. The funding also does not have to be spent on any specific project. It's designed to cover whatever you need to support your practice, including purchasing materials, paying rent, buying food, pursuing an important learning opportunity, traveling, basically anything you need to continue to practice your traditions.
All right, who can apply? So both organizations and individual artists can self-nominate for Walking Together. Today, we're focusing on individual artists. So to learn more about self-nominating for organizations, you can watch the recording of our webinar from last Thursday, which is on the website, and that focuses more on organizations. So I'll talk about self-nominating as an individual artist and practitioner. You should meet the following requirements: be a traditional artist, folklife practitioner, keeper, archiver, or documenter of traditional knowledge rooted in communities of color. As Ellie mentioned, traditions include but are not limited to visual arts such as crafts, performing arts such as traditional music, dance, or storytelling, food or medicine such as traditional agriculture, food preparation, hunting and or foraging, community history or oral history to share with future generations and or larger audiences. You should create work that is traditional art in your process and or finished products. For example, you may use traditional skills or techniques to create work that fits traditional aesthetics, but you may also use those techniques to create contemporary work or represent your community's traditional aesthetics and knowledge with modern techniques. You should also be active in sustaining your community's traditions as a connector, mentor, learner, advocate, and or a leader. For example, you might be an elder or a young emerging leader who shows commitment to growing your practice and passing it along to others. You should live within one of the 56 US states and or jurisdictions served by the regional arts organizations or federally recognized Native nations that share this geography. You should also demonstrate a history of actively practicing your traditional art form and engaging with your community for the last 3 years, or at least 3 years. And lastly, you should be a US citizen, US national, or permanent resident.
So now we'll dive into how you can self-nominate and explain a little bit about the review process. So there are 2 stages in the Walking Together application process. Today, we're going to talk about the first round, the self-nominations, which are open right now. A select number of nominees will be invited to complete a full application over the summer in round 2, and then the final grantees will be chosen from that invited group. But for now, the self-nominations are a short form about your work that expresses interest in applying to Walking Together. The deadline for these self-nominations is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to self-nominate, there are 3 ways you can do that. The first is written online via Mid-Atlantic Arts grant portal, which we call Smart Simple, at midatlanticarts.smartsimple.com. You can also answer all the questions verbally and submit one recording. That recording should be no longer than 5 minutes, and you'll also submit that via the online form. So both written and audio online applications are done through the Smart Simple grant portal. Please see the guidelines at usregionalarts.org/walkingtogether for more information about audio submissions, like file formats and additional details. Lastly, you can request a printed hard copy of the self-nomination form. You can fill it out and mail it back to us at Mid-Atlantic Arts. And again, please see the guidelines for more details. You can email walkingtogether@midatlanticarts.org or call 667-401-2587 to request a hard copy by mail. If you want to apply online, either written or audio responses, you'll visit midatlanticarts.smartsimple.com. If you've applied to Mid-Atlantic Arts before, you can log in using your existing credentials. But if you haven't, you'll need to create a new account. If you've applied to a different RAO before, like if you've applied to funding through Mid-America Arts Alliance, but not Mid-Atlantic, you will have to make a new account. To do that, you'll click the button at the bottom left of the login screen, that big purple button that says register, and you'll choose individual artist if you are applying as an individual artist. You'll fill out some basic contact information, and then you'll submit your registration. You will need to activate your registration by finding a confirmation email in your inbox from noreply@smartsimple.com, which will have a link that you can click to create a new password and log in. If you don't see it in your email, make sure to check your spam folder. It likes to hide out in there sometimes. We also have step-by-step registration guides with even more screenshots and pictures in the Walking Together guidelines. So visit those guidelines to find the link to that step-by-step registration guide. Once you log in, you'll see your Smart Simple dashboard. It's that picture at the top with all the icons. You'll scroll down to available applications and click on the big purple number where it says funding opportunities. Then you'll find Walking Together in the list of funding opportunities. It's the first one, so you don't have to look very far. And this will take you to the self-nomination form. Click Save Draft to officially start your application and save it in the system. And don't forget to save often every time you get to the bottom of a page so that you don't lose your progress. You can leave the form, come back, and continue to edit as long as you've saved it and not yet hit submit. You'll go back to your dashboard and scroll down to in progress applications to find your in progress application. You can do that at any time before you submit and continue to work on your self-nomination.
All right. So what do you need to actually fill out your self-nomination? The form will include 2 narrative questions, a community support sample, and 2 other recommended work samples. So for the 2 narrative questions, first is the artist practitioner statement. In 400 words, tell us about you. What traditions or traditional art forms do you practice? How did you learn? Why are they important to you? For the community sustainability statement, in 400 words, how does your practice connect to your community? Why are you and your work important to your community? Please share an example of how you help your traditions continue to thrive in the future. So for these 2 questions, you do not need to use the full 400 words if you're filling this out as a written narrative. If you're submitting an audio, please make sure to answer these 2 questions in one recording under 5 minutes, as Ellie mentioned. And in addition to answering these narrative questions, you must submit one example of community support. Please submit this in PDF format. Some examples of this might be a letter of support from a mentor or community leader. This could also be a partnership letter describing a successful collaboration, or a description of a successful program that shows evidence of community involvement. Lastly, you may submit work samples to support your application and help reviewers understand your community's traditions, work, and connection to your community. This could be examples of a link to your website or social media that showcases you and your work. It could also be a link or a photo of a local news feature that recognizes you and your work. For visual or craft artists, maybe this is a photo or video of you working, your process, and or finished work that you're proud of. For musicians, dancers, storytellers, and other performing artists, this could be a short video of you performing or audio that you've produced. For food practitioners, herbalists, and keepers of other traditional life knowledge, a work sample could be a photo or video of you working, your process, and or a photo of a completed dish, garden plot, etc. So the reviewers will spend about 5 minutes reviewing your work samples, so please be selective and only choose 2 to 3 total samples to share. And you can find more details on formats and limitations in the guidelines. So for the review process, in each RAO region, a diverse panel including folklorists, cultural workers, artists, practitioners, and culture bearers will review round 1 self-nominations. They will recommend a small pool of applicants, which the RAOs will invite for round 2, as mentioned. We'll end up inviting about 108 artists to round 2, and this breaks down to 18 artists from each region. The panel will review self-nominations on these 3 criteria. First is the artist commitment. Artists that score a full 20 points for this criteria will show a history of deep commitment to their traditions. They will understand the history, context, and living importance of their traditions and how to represent those traditions well. Future sustainability. Artists that score a full 40 points for this criteria will show how through their work, they strengthen the sustainability of their traditions into the future. This will include creating, teaching, sharing, presenting, or advocating for their traditions within their community and or beyond. Lastly is community support. Artists that score a full 40 points for this criteria will show how their work is deeply embedded in their community. Other community members or organizations may recognize them as a leader, resource, or steward for their traditions. This includes a demonstrated history of successful leadership and or collaboration with other community members or organizations.
So here are a few tips to keep in mind as you work on your self-nomination. First, make sure you read the program guidelines very carefully. Those guidelines are your one-stop shop for all things walking together. Read the list of eligibility criteria carefully in the Who's Walking Together For section. Make sure that all of that applies to you. Think carefully about which self-nomination format you want to use. Do you want to complete the form? Or do you want to record an audio selection to submit? Make sure you understand the goals of the program and take advantage of all the support resources that are listed on pages 20 and 21. Start early. Give yourself plenty of time to register in Smart Simple or to request a hard copy application. Ask us questions, fill out the form, get your community support sample together, review everything carefully, and submit. Do not wait until the last minute. The closer it gets to the due date, the more questions we get and the harder it is for us to answer you quickly. Also, as much as we love Smart Simple, don't trust it too much. Keep a copy of your answers in a Word document so it is an easy cut and paste into the Smart Simple form if something goes off the rails. And keep in mind that there will be a lot of people using it toward the end of the self-nomination period. So don't let technical difficulties keep you from submitting on time. To make sure we have a fair process, we cannot accept any late self-nominations. If you turn yours in at 12:02 a.m. Eastern Time on March 20th, it's late and our reviewers will not read it. So give yourself plenty of time. And speaking of reviewers, although they all have experience with traditional arts, folk life in the United States, folk life in the United States, it's just so diverse. It's impossible for them, the reviewers, to be experts in every community's traditions. Even if you're very well known in your community, assume that the reviewers are meeting you for the very first time. Now, in this nomination is not the time to be modest. Give the reviewers the juicy details about your work, how you learned it, and what your goals are, and the importance of the traditions you support. Don't leave them with questions about who you are or what you do. Make your work samples work for you. Like Say said, different kinds of work samples will be better for different kinds of artists. Just like how different mediums are better for different creative projects, think about what medium of work sample matches you best. Video, photo, etc. And think about what you're really proud of. If you're not a big social media person, you're not proud of your Instagram presence, don't worry about submitting that as a work sample. Instead, focus on really high quality photos of your work. If you're a teaching artist and you have videos or photos of you teaching or testimonials from some of your learners, that might make a really good work sample as well. So, like Say said, be selective. Quality is better than quantity for the work samples. When you finish writing or recording your narrative questions, when you've picked all your samples, look back at the review criteria in the guidelines. What score would you give yourself? Are you covering every criterion? Remember, that's what the reviewers use to recommend folks for round 2, so make those criteria your best friend. And lastly, come talk to us. We have a whole team, as you've seen this evening, of Walking Together advisors who want to talk to you about your self-nomination.
I couldn't have said it better. Please call me, and if I don't answer, leave a message. That's how I know you're not a robot. I'll call you back. And if you leave me a joke, I'll call you back even quicker. So, find your region on our website, usregionalarts.org/walking together, and then get to know who your advisor is. We can help you narrow down on what you should focus on in your narrative responses. We can help recommend what kind of work samples you should submit, if you're choosing between different ones. We can help you decide on whether to self-nominate in the first place. We all have office hours where you can drop in without an appointment. Visit usregionalarts.org/walking together or go to the guidelines to find more information about that. And if those dates don't work for you, reach out for a conversation on your schedule. We can find some time. We have a pipe dream that will talk to every nominee before they submit their self-nomination. So help us make that dream a reality. Don't be a stranger. Call me. Seriously. I mean it. Let's look at some important dates. We have round one application coming up quick, March 19th. You'll know if you are going on to round two by Thursday, June 5th, 2025, of course. And then round two, if you're accepted, you'll be invited to apply again. That deadline will be July 21st. And final grantees will be notified in October, with the award year of January 1st to December 31st, 2026. That's all we have, but we want to hear from you. What questions do we have in the chat? Remember, again, down at the bottom, or now for me, it's at the top, close to the right, Q&A. Please put them there so that we can read them. I see we have a few. Let me pull them up.
Do you want to put the slide with our contact information back, maybe, so folks can look at that while we...
The beginning.
I think it's just a couple back. One more.
Oh, there we go.
There it is.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. All right, this person asks, they work in traditional art and organize an event in their community, but they have a need of going out sometimes to bigger cities to connect with more members of the community and immerse my art in bigger outreach. If my reach in my community is small, but I travel to reach other people, can I still apply? This is a great question, and the answer is yes. Community does not only mean geographic community. Community could mean people who practice your art form, people who are members of your heritage group, or people who are members of your local geographic community, all three of them, or something completely different. So if your community includes people who are on the other side of the country from you, but you are still deeply embedded with them, you practice together, you are part of a community of practice together, and you have that support from them, then you should apply. Then this program could be for you. That's a great question.
If someone asks, does organization mean nonprofit only? No. You do not have to be a 501c3 to apply. You can be a collective that, is a satellite of something smaller that doesn't have any kind of legal organization attached to it. That's what the other organization category is for.
Yeah, so we went into this in a little more detail in our organizational webinar last week, and you can see all the different kinds of organizations that can apply in the guidelines. But we do welcome applications from nonprofits, fiscally sponsored organizations, businesses like LLCs and S Corps, university departments, centers that are part of local or tribal governments, and a lot more. Basically, any kind of collective you can think of, we probably want to hear from you. So check out the guidelines if you have questions about whether your organization fits.
Someone asks, my work falls into a few of the folk life categories. Is there opportunity to speak to the multiple forms that some of us express, or will the questions want us to focus on one art form only? It's a pretty good question. What do you think, Ellie?
Anybody else is also welcome to jump in to answer questions. But we know lots of you probably are working within multiple traditions or multiple genres, and you should feel welcome to mention that in your application. If you practice more than one and you want to focus on one of them, that's great. But if you're a multi-genre artist, that's pretty common, and we want to hear about it. So don't worry about limiting yourself to only one tradition if you practice more than one.
Someone asks, are there word count or minimum for any of the questions? Yes, all of them have some type of limit. I don't know what they are off the
I
top
can
of
help
my head.
here. It's
Perfect.
400 words. There is no minimum, but there is a maximum. And there are two narrative questions.
Thank you.
Or a 5-minute recording if you choose to use the audio option. Let's see. If I feel like we've already answered your question, we may not answer it again here, but if you still have other questions, feel free to reach out to us outside of the webinar. We just want to get to as many questions as we can. Will there be a certain number of artists in each genre, or is it based on the panel judging? That's a good question. We don't have quotas based on genre. We are hoping for a broad diversity of artists in the final grantee pool, including a broad diversity in their background, in the genres that they practice, in where they are. But we don't have specific quotas for that. It will be based on the scores and discussion from our panelists. That's a good question.
Ooh, that's a really good question about can community be an online community? I hadn't really thought about that. I imagine that it could be, certainly.
Yeah, I think this is connected to what we said earlier, especially today, folks who practice might be connected with folks who are geographically very far away from them, but do have very deep connections to one another using online channels. So if you feel like that describes you, you should still apply. Think about who in that community would be a good fit, like to write your community support sample, or how you would talk about your community support in the community sustainability statement in the narrative questions. You may need to think about those things a little bit differently if you work primarily in an online community as opposed to a sort of physical one. But you're still welcome to apply. That still counts as community, certainly. This person asks, for the community support sample, could a short video talking about the work be presented, or does this need to be a letter type document? Would it be preferable to get community support from another artist, academic organization, or community member? That's a great question. So the community support sample, just in the formats that our form allows, the community support sample should be in PDF form. So a letter would be best for that. But if you have a short video from someone that's like a testimonial about working with you, that kind of could function as a letter of recommendation, but it's in a video format, that would make an outstanding work sample. And I recommend you include that as a work sample. The form is just set up to accept PDFs for community support samples. As far as who would be the best person to write your community support sample for you, this really depends on what your work is and who you're most connected to. The point of the community support sample, we've been calling it like a cosign, like from somebody else in your community. The point is to show that someone other than you recognizes that your work is important, that you're a leader in the community, that you're focused on the sustainability of your traditions. So depending on what you do, that might be different people. But it should be somebody who can really speak to your commitment to your traditions and your role in your community. And again, depending on who you are, that might be different relationships to you. And I recommend you reach out to whoever your Walking Together advisor is to have a one-on-one conversation if you're on the fence or aren't totally sure about who the best person would be to write your community support sample.
I see a question about how many applications we typically receive, and this is the first time that we're offering this program. It is a one-time opportunity at this point. I don't believe that there are plans for this to be recurring opportunities, so please take advantage of it. Don't wait for the next time around.
And just to piggyback off that, someone asked about examples of past recipients. So just so you know, this is the first time, and as we know, one and done.
Mm-hmm.
We hope it won't be the last time we can offer programs like this. But as far as we know, Walking Together will be a one-time opportunity that we hope will help us inform future programming. But Walking Together itself, as far as we know, will only happen this one time. Someone asks, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm seeing a couple of questions about if an organization and an individual of the same organization can apply. I had a similar kind of question come up earlier today. Someone said that they are a part of a band, but they themselves are a musician. And so they wanted to know which category they can apply in. And the answer is both. The group can apply as an organization in whatever structure that they are set up to do such a nomination, but then the individual artists within that group can also apply for the individual aspect of this. So don't miss that opportunity as well.
And the review process for those is completely separate. So if you apply on behalf of an organization that you work with and you apply yourself, those are totally separate. They're not competing with each other. So it won't affect your nomination for one if you also self-nominate as an individual. I see a question asking if there are size limits to the work samples or community support sample examples. There are some size limits to photo file formats, and those you can find in the guidelines. For things like video and audio, if you are submitting narrative question responses as an audio format, you can do that directly by like attaching the audio file. But if you want to add audio or video work samples, you will have to have those listed somewhere online, like YouTube, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Vimeo, something like that. And then you actually just give us a link for the reviewers to access the video or audio. So you don't need to worry about file sizes because you're sharing a web version of the recording instead. Again, if you have questions about that, like please reach out to us and we can help talk you through it because it is a little confusing, but that is how we're preventing worrying about file sizes. And for photos, you don't have to worry about file size. There's plenty of room for those. But for larger things like video and audio, we ask for you to send us a link to a web version instead of directly uploading it.
I see a question that I also had come into my inbox earlier today. South Arts, which I'm not with South Arts, Taylor is, but Mid-America Arts Alliance also has a cultural sustainability grant that is currently open. We have, South Arts, it's open for applications. Our application just recently closed, and you may have seen in our guidelines that you cannot be a recipient of Walking Together if you are an Arts Here or Cultural Sustainability grantee. So I am suggesting to folks who in Mid-America's region or in South Arts' region that you apply for both opportunities. The timing of notification is such that if we cross that bridge and you are awarded in both, then we would have a conversation about which program you should be participating in, which would be the best option for you, because then we would maximize that opportunity and then share that funding in either program with someone else who's also eligible to receive it. So we want to maximize this opportunity, and that's why those who have already received or have applied and potentially could receive are not meant to get Walking Together as well, because we're wanting to spread the wealth quite literally.
Also seeing some questions that are getting at like what kind of project can be supported or like what kind of expenses. So we can say the good news again. This is not a project grant. This really is unrestricted funding for you to continue doing your work. You do not need to be creating a project or pitching a project as part of your application. The panel wants to hear who you are and what you do. And that's what you'll see in those questions in the application or in the self-nomination.
Let's see. I see a question that says, my organization is less than a year old, but I've been doing this art and work for 13 plus years. Am I still eligible to apply as an LLC in my community? I think yes, but you will need to spend some time in your narrative responses or in your work samples showing that history of work. This is not the first time I've gotten that question either. I think it's totally possible for someone to have a long history of working in their community and only having incorporated more recently. You would still be eligible, but because like on paper your organization has existed for a year, we want you to hear the details about the longevity of your work and how embedded you are in your community before you kind of got that piece of paper. Because what really matters is the work that you've been doing, not the piece of paper. So just make sure that you're sharing about that history in your self-nomination.
Ellie, I see a question here that you might be better seated to answer about who the folks are that are this working circle team and who it is that's going to be reviewing the nominations. Because we are staff, obviously, and so we are reviewing applications or nominations only as grant makers. But we have a whole separate team that you might want to speak to instead, Ellie.
Yeah, I missed that question. Thanks for pointing that out. So you may see on the, you may see mentions in the guidelines or the application to this working circle. We didn't really focus on that today, but I can say a little bit about what that means. So we here who are presenting, we are, like Christine said, we are staff members at the regional arts organizations. The working circles are regional steering committees, folk arts community leaders who we asked and who were gracious enough to help us design this program. So they're folks who we've been working with for almost a year now, like 8 months now, who helped us design the program and design the application and who will help us review the first round. We are keeping them, for the most part, anonymous until we award them. But you may hear other things about their involvement in the program, and we will share more about them once Walking Together is awarded. But there were a lot more people involved in designing this program other than just the staff members who you see here, and we're extremely indebted and very, very grateful for all of those people for being a part of this design process and really making Walking Together as community-driven a program as it could be. That's a really good question. Someone says I've received funding for U.S. Artists International, which is another Mid-Atlantic arts program. Do I say yes to this question? I assume there's a question in the self-nomination that asks, have you ever received funding from an RAO before? So in your case, you would answer yes to that question. If you've ever received funding from an RAO, answer yes. That's not a criterion. That won't affect how likely you are to get a grant. It is just something that we want to know so that we know how many people are applying to us for the first time through Walking Together versus people who maybe we had a connection to, who we already knew beforehand. That's really for our internal evaluation purposes. It won't affect your application. We have a couple questions that are similar. One person that says, I'm an Ecuadorian American traditional dancer who's worked on preserving and promoting traditional dances from other cultures. And someone else who says, I'm Oglala Lakota, but my community connections are in Wisconsin rather than my home state of South Dakota. And these are both different questions, but they both kind of are asking, is it okay if my community includes people outside of my own background? I think we sort of addressed this a little bit earlier with the question about geography, but yes, communities are very diverse, people move around, communities are multicultural. That's just a beautiful fact of life about living in this country. And what we really care about is that community embeddedness and kind of connection to community. So if you can demonstrate that the people who you work with recognize you as a part of their community, as a practitioner who they respect and trust, they could be from a different background or from a different place than you are. But again, what's really important is like demonstrating that connection. And it sounds like in both of these cases, you probably have that, and would just need to share about it in your application.
There are a couple of back-to-back questions here too about the support letters. One was asking if they could gather different support letters together as testimonials. I think we're just looking for one community support sample, correct? So we're just looking for one. The next question asked if a community support document could be from a family member who's part of that family tradition. Um, and that's a great question. What do you think about that, Ellie?
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things about these traditional art forms is that people learn them from their families a lot of the times. Not always. You might learn them, from a completely different person, but it's common for people to learn within their families. And if your mentor or leader who you learned from is a family member, we welcome that. That can actually be a great way of demonstrating community rootedness, and your history in your community. It's not the only way, but that's totally legitimate. Somebody else asked about the community support sample, if this is a letter that you should request from a partner or something that you already have on hand. It could be either one. We kind of intended this to be something that you would ask of someone specifically for this self-nomination, but we also recognize that that can take time and that it might be hard for someone to find the time to do that. So it could also be something that you already have on hand. That's why it could be like a letter, or it could be a description or an example of work that really shows that you had community buy-in and collaboration. So if you are having a hard time finding somebody who can write you a letter, we understand, we're working on limited time here, people are busy. It doesn't have to be a letter that someone wrote specifically for this application. It could be like a description or a letter that someone wrote for a different opportunity. Don't be shy about reusing things, certainly. And it doesn't have to be something that's only for walking together.
Someone was asking what the impetus was to create this program. That's a really great question.
That's a really great question, and I hope that any of my colleagues will jump in and interrupt me if they want to, because I think we probably all have slightly different responses to this. But we, as the regional arts organizations, some of us have been working in folk and traditional arts for a long time. Some of us are just getting started. Some of us have long histories of working within communities of color in our regions. Some of us have not always done such a great job of that and are trying to reach those communities in a more meaningful way. We were lucky enough to have access to this private funding that was interested in funding a program specifically for traditional arts rooted in communities of color. And we basically jumped at the chance to deepen our connections, both in folk and traditional arts and in traditions rooted in communities of color. We hope that this program will be a first step towards all of us being able to continue that work. And like somebody mentioned earlier, this program will be pretty competitive. We will have a small number of grantees at the end of the day, but we hope that the connections that we make through this program will help us design programs for you better in the future. So this is not the only opportunity you have to connect with us. And that, yeah, this can be a first step. Anything else that I'm missing? And
I
Yeah,
think
we're just trying to create more communication between RAOs, state folklorists, um, organizations that serve folklife communities, and individual artists all around the board from the bottom to the very top. So,
And I feel compelled to say that in this moment, in this current environment that we're all living through, this kind of program is so vitally important to help support the work that you're doing. I think that goes without saying, but it was worth bringing that up.
sure.
yeah, thanks, Christine. Well said. Oh, this is a good question. We have about 5 minutes, so there's room for a couple more questions. And if we don't get to your question today, please find the one of us who is your walking together advisor and just ask us outside of this webinar, because we still want to talk to you even if we run out of time today. Oh, I just lost it. Where'd it go?
I might have accidentally put it
Did
away.
you?
Sorry.
There is a question here that asks if the reviewers have experience with equity-focused grant making. And I think the participatory grant process that we've gone through so far, where we have these working circles, has laid a really solid foundation to get feedback from those who are in the field doing this kind of work in the creation of the grant program. And I believe it's our intention to carry that through for the reviewers as well, correct?
Yeah, I think that's well said. Um, Oh, someone asks where our private funding is coming from. We have a very generous private funder who would prefer to remain anonymous. I understand why we get that question. I understand why people want to know. I appreciate that. But we are just sharing right now that we have a private funder who is 100% funding this program. It's all coming from one source. And that certainly makes it easy for us to continue this program during this time. So we are grateful for that. Can other organizations or mentors be mentioned or referenced in the community support sample? Or does it have to only reference the relationship the person writing has with the individual artist applying? The first one sounds great to me. um, Certainly, it could be coming from a very personal place for the person who's writing your letter. But if they want to share examples, if they're like, hey, I mentored this person, but I have seen them mentor others, I have seen them collaborate with organizations. That sounds like a really robust and strong support sample that would be a great addition to an application. So it doesn't have to only be from the perspective of one person. And you can also flesh that out in your work samples. The community support sample, the reason why we're only asking for one is it's kind of a minimum threshold to cross is having at least one person who can co-sign your embeddedness in community. But that doesn't mean that it has to be the only example of that you share in your application. Your work samples can supplement that, depending on what your work looks like and what makes sense for you.
There was a question here too about asking us to please restate when an arts and culture organization can apply. The organization nomination process is going on at the same time as this individual artist nomination process is going on. So if you are interested in self-nominating yourself as an artist, there is at that point that you log in, you'll have that opportunity to select one. If you are also then not self-nominating an organization that you are affiliated with, that you work for, that you run, I believe you have to create a new account. Is that correct, Ellie?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. We should have mentioned that earlier. If you want to apply both as an organization and an artist, you will need to have to register twice in the Smart Simple Grant portal using different email addresses. So like a work email and a personal email. And then you'll use one account to self-nominate as an individual and another account to self-nominate on behalf of an organization. And again, if you have questions about that, hit us up individually because we can help walk you through it. But yeah, you will need to have separate accounts for them. I think we are just about at time. Any of my colleagues have anything else they want to answer or add before we finish up for the day? If we didn't get to your question, please reach out to us. Our emails are all there on the screen. We all have office hours that you can join, and I hope that you will. We really love talking to people about their applications. It's like one of my favorite parts of my job. I know that's also true for everyone else here. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for giving us your afternoon or evening, and we hope to see your self-nomination come through the portal very soon. Have a great rest of your day.